Today's panel we kind of did on an ad hoc basis because of our speaker who dropped out. But we thought, all right, let's do something on the state of the industry, what's happening, what are observations and trends. So here we go. I'm going to start with Mr. Paul Flannery. As the industry emerged from the recession in 2008 to 2012, what new trends have you noticed and observed?
We don't sell as much as we want to. The primary sector that I deal in is, I did do a lot of sport fish stuff for a long time. Primarily, I moved over into Down East and Pilot House cruising boats. 40 to 80 feet is the primary area where I spend most of my time. I was with Grand Banks for quite a few years there after the recession, and Grand Banks has had a very difficult time, as I have seen, gaining traction again. Some of the things that I think many of the manufacturers have had a difficult time doing is finding the resources to reinvent themselves a bit and not offer the same old thing warmed over with a new GPS on it. So that's been a challenge for a lot of them. I can tell you that those that seem to have emerged very well from the downturn, Viking has continued to do well year over year over year. I was speaking to someone this morning that gave me some insight on specifics with Viking. In this fiscal year, they'll deliver just under 68 new boats. Their average size used to be in the mid-50s. Their average size today is 70 feet.
Wow.
So the average retail of those boats is significantly higher. So for Viking, they've capitalized on the vacuum that's been created in that segment of the market. I know that Hatteras, I also spoke with someone there this morning, and Hatteras didn't really want to disclose their unit sales, but what they did tell me is that they are up 25% year over year from last year. Their product mix, as I think probably most all of you have seen that are involved in that segment of the industry, is about 60% motor yacht and about 40% in the sport fish market. I represent Veacham. We're distributors for Veacham, and Veacham is a custom build in Turkey. So it's really a very different and sort of a boutique type product. And those sorts of products, I think there's a lot more difficulty in gaining traction.
In the sport fish market, what I recall from the dark days is that you couldn't sell a sport fish when it was really bad, say 2008 to 2010. The secondary market was flooded with them. And then, as you speak to, based on Viking's numbers and the positive things at Hatteras, it was like a switch flipped, and now the market came roaring back. Merritt had full orders, Viking had orders.
Yeah, Michael Rybovich has got a full order.
Yeah, Hatteras was bought by the venture cap private equity guys,
right,
and apparently are doing a good job with it. Did you observe a similar trend?
Yeah, same thing. The thing that you got to remember, and that we saw, whether we recognized it or not, is in 2000, 2003, 2005, guys that were walking around with a hammer on their belts in 1996 were running 8 and 12 and 25 framing crews or plumbing contractors. These guys were making $50, $80, $100,000 a month. They didn't know what to do with the money. They couldn't go into the Viking dealer fast enough and plump their money down. And then the economy crashed, their businesses went in the toilet, and they couldn't make their payments, and the market became flooded with all that product. And it took a long time for that to get sorted out. And the ability for them to recover and come back into the marketplace for new product has been really slow. And we had a big attrition, if you'll remember, in builders as well. We've lost a lot. The entire Lures Marine Group went away. Hunter was sold off and Mainship was sold off, but Silverton no longer exists. Not that they're sportfish guys, but Silverton and Mainship basically no longer exist. There are a lot of other manufacturers that no longer exist. So I think our market shrunk considerably, and our buyers' field shrunk considerably too.
Right, thank you. Andy, You represent Westports and you also do brokerage boats. What trends have you seen? What did you guys observe during the recession, and what have you seen since then, and what do you, in the way of changes?
If you go back 15 years ago, I think we had 23 yards producing boats in the, let's just call it 100, 130 foot sector. It has nearly completely evaporated, and it's down to about 4.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S. We've had a supply issue in late model brokerage, and I think it's the same for Hatteras, for Viking, for anything in that 2007, 8 up through 12. That's been an issue for every one of us that are in the brokerage business, is trying to find that boat. As a matter of fact, as a shipyard, when we get a late model listing, 3 out of 4 times that boat doesn't make it to the marketplace. So there's pent-up demand for used product. New product, we were doing, I think, 18 builds right before the crash.
Across the spectrum, or like
We sold 6
98s
130s.
to 164s?
We sold 6 130s, and we're high-fiving each other at the Fort Lauderdale show in '07, in one show. The upside is that we didn't have, out of all these builds that were in play, we didn't have anyone back out. We had one individual who could not go through, and we actually resold that position and gave him his deposit back. So we're very fortunate to have a backlog, and that did carry us through those couple of very hard years. I'm real happy about where our company is going, and we have some really exciting things that we're bringing to market. We are still in this area of how to satisfy the immediate need, but we try to keep, like myself, I work the brokers in the industry probably harder than I work finding new clients.
Say that again, please.
I work my fellow brokers in the industry probably harder than I do trying to find new clients, because that really is the key to selling and the key to keeping the shipyard going, and is just developing good, solid relationships. When I get a call from a guy like you, I get excited. It gives me an opportunity to talk about what we're doing, keep our business. So we got 650 guys we got to keep in shoes and socks, and some third generation guys in construction there. And we are able to work with you guys and the community, the brokerage community as a whole, to keep our product out there. I'm more than happy to discuss with you anytime you can call me. Anybody can call me about the new 125 we have, that our first one launches in about a month. We've got a 112 that'll be a 17 model that launches in August.
Right. So you guys are broker friendly.
Of course.
Okay.
To some people.
Yeah. Right.
But we've got a 130
Yeah.
that is coming up that's available.
Okay, great.
Andrew
Silla, what was your experience during the dark days in the business, and what changes have you seen that you want to comment on?
Well, there have been a lot of changes, of course. Having gotten into the business in 1973, I've seen 5 recessions and 2 fuel crises and a luxury tax. All of those had about the same effect. This is the most recent, but when we talk about new boats relative to brokerage, it's been my observation that the quality brands remain active or successful for a longer period of time, and they recover quicker. So
give us an example, please.
Viking, for example. Yeah. When Silverton and Lours couldn't sell a boat, Viking was still building and successfully marketing their product. After the recession, end of '08 into '09, people are getting back and buying Vikings. They weren't buying the Silvertons and Lures. Vikings in Business Silverton and Lures is out. So the quality brands, the popular brands, would typically remain successful for a longer span and then recover quicker, so the down cycle is shorter. But there are a lot of second-tier builders that probably will never recover because their cost basis is now too high. They were building 3 times as many boats as they are now. They have their fixed cost and their debt relative to the number of units they produce. Creates too much of a financial burden for them to be competitive. So unfortunately, one by one, many of the, call them second-tier builders, not because the quality is less, but because
business model.
it's business model, branding, whatever. And I think, we see that going through the boating magazines. The firms that used to advertise every month in many of the magazines seldom advertise. You go to a boat show, they may have 2 boats when they used to have 5 or 6 boats. But there's been a purging of all of the, or many of the second-tier boat builders. So that's the biggest phenomenon that I've noticed since the last downturn.
Great, thanks. Now, Paul, you've had experience on the new boat side with Sunseeker and more recently in brokerage, seeing both sides of the coin. What have been your observations?
Interestingly enough, it's like mirroring what...
Is your mic on?
Hello?
We get, I don't think we have a mic that's on.
Here you go. No, hold on, I got it ready.
There you go. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Mirroring what Andrew's just pointed out, one of the things that I don't have is maybe the 50 years. I don't know if I'm calculating that. But
47.
Okay. Being in Asia when they had a massive downturn in 1997, coming out of that, it was everyone steered away from the locally built boats or the Taiwanese-built boats, and they felt that those were the boats that cost them the most amount of money coming out of the recession. So they looked at what I would call premier brands from Europe or the US, and seeing that again here, going into brokerage now primarily, when you're only really steering towards new boats and with some brokerage there as well, your focus with the customer is a lot more based on what you can do, maybe being price effective or maybe being more diverse with how you're going to win their business, making changes within the build, making them feel like whatever you do, you're trying to give them the custom that they're looking for. With brokerage, again, seeing over the last sort of 7 years that there's been a hole from 2009 through to maybe 13, 14, where we haven't seen a lot of product come into the US from the other countries, the other builders. So there is a shortage of what we would call mainstream good builders that have put boats into the US. And that means you're seeing a lot of customers who you've done a good job of convincing them to buy new, or maybe they bought new, who are going into their next boat, they're going larger, and they're looking a lot more internationally now for their next product because there's a shortage of the products here. So my main thing that I've seen is that I think the brokers have become much more, and sales individuals within the facilities have become much more educated in what they're providing to the customers, and the customers and the clientele have experienced and become much more educated in their boating. So now they have the spoilings of saying, well, I want that product, and if I can't find it here, I'm willing to go elsewhere to go and find the product, as opposed to just buying on price or buying whatever is put in front of them.
Right. I'd like just to poll the audience quickly with respect to inventory. How many brokers in the audience feel that there is a good selection of inventory right now in their particular market? Raise your hands, please. Well, not very many. So it looks like I need to ask the second part. So majority feel that the state of the current inventory is weak. Is that, raise your hand. And is that weak because of diversity or because of the age of the boats or quality? For quality? No quality inventory. Interesting. I mean, we've all noticed is that during that time, builders built fewer boats. And then that's had a knock-on effect into what we can sell now. And when I look at the market, whether it's like this, let's take the Viking Sportfish market. I've got a client who wants a late model 54 or 61 or 62 or whatever, and there's between 2008 and 2010 or 11, there doesn't seem to be much, but you get to 2012, we're now seeing inventory. Have you observed the same?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a major chasm in building through that period of time. There was nobody to buy them. The manufacturers that could survive, that had a few dollars buried in a 55-gallon drum in the back of the plant, they could keep their doors open and keep a skeleton crew employed, so they were able to survive, but they weren't building much of anything. Number of builds for Viking through 09 and 10 and 11 were probably down in the teens, low 20s, and now they're up to triple and quadruple those numbers because the demand is there. Like we said, a couple of the manufacturers just couldn't even hold on because they hadn't planned for that rainy day. Gotcha. So they just evaporated. And we knew when we saw the market starting to fall out, and we saw the financial markets falling apart, we knew that our business was going to suffer significantly. And we also knew that the day was going to come in the not too distant future, that there'd be nothing for us to sell. So it's been critically important for the smart brokers to maintain the good relationships you have with your customers. Keep those boats in your stable. Stay next to those people that you did business with through those years and you did business with before then. You know, I was talking with one of the yacht finance guys earlier this year, and he said to me, actually it was last year, he said to me, do you realize that a 2000 model boat is going to get a second look from underwriting now because that's a 15-year-old boat? When many of us remember vividly when 2000 model was a brand new, and we also remember hearing all the stories about Y2K and all the scare about 2000. It's not that long ago, but in different schemes, it is a long time ago. Now, the last year of prolific building was really 07. That's a 10-year-old boat now, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Andy?
Get used to the 10-year-old, 3, 4, 5,000 hour boat as the norm to sell. And that's what we've been facing for a little while is unless the individual is going to pay up substantially for a new build and they're more comfortable at a price point in the brokerage market, you're selling them a 10-year-old boat. I mean, I'm sure you agree.
Yeah,
and then,
absolutely.
And they're like, my God, 3,000 hours, 4,000 hours, when then you have to educate them on that. But it's a different curve that we didn't have to deal with 5 years ago.
Right.
And like Andy says, if you want a post-recession boat, you're going to pay 2.5 times the price that you would pay for a pre-recession boat of a very similar description.
Right, supply and demand, perfect. Okay, let's change tack a little bit here. What would you say, and this is not necessarily manufacturer market-wise, but in general, in the way we operate in this industry, what would you say Andrew Silla is right with the industry, and what do you say is wrong with the industry and why? Let's start with what's right about it.
All right. There's a lot right, and I don't think there's that much wrong. I think what's right is what's happening here today. There's a small group of brokers that want to further educate themselves so they can provide, do their job better, more professionally. So I think that's a very good thing. That's credit to those of you that run the FYBA. I think what's bad is that there aren't enough people here. I would suspect there are 500 to 750 brokers that are within an hour of Pier 66. And I have been to every seminar that I've been physically able to attend since this organization was founded. And I'm amazed at how much I learned in the course of 6 or 7 hours. And it boggles my mind that there aren't more people like us that want to come here and learn and become better prepared to do what it is we do. But what's wrong is that unfortunately we are gauged, or I think we are measured by not what we do, you and me or those of us up here, but what our industry does as a whole. And there are a couple of thousand yacht brokers just licensed in the state of Florida. Many, and unfortunately most of those brokers don't have the level of education or product knowledge that we do. And so that reflects on who we are and how we're perceived in the marketplace. I think that if buyers and sellers came to know this group, they'd be much more apt to invite us into a transaction. So
Right.
what's good is we're here, we're doing this, we're learning. What's bad is that there are a lot of brokers that don't take the business, their business, our business, as serious as we do, in my opinion.
What about in the way we do business with one another as brokers? You know,
I think it's
broker
very
to
good.
broker.
I mean, I have to say that a lot of years in the business. Next year will be, I think, my 40th year as the owner of Blue Crown Yachts. I have no enemies. Everybody here is my friend.
Yeah, that you know of.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Good point. Good point. No, I find it to be. I love the business, and I think that as a whole, it is as good as it's ever been. And I'm proud to be a yacht broker, and I'm proud to be associated with this organization. And I think that we conduct ourselves as well as to be expected. I mean, there are issues, there are problems, there are people that don't know how to get along, and there are people that lack professionalism. But in large, I think this is a good organization, and it's a great industry, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Yeah. Andy, what are your thoughts? Yeah.
I would like to point out that most everyone in here, you know, we all know each other. I would say most of the trading, 80%, gets done by 20% of what brokers are considered full-time. There's really a handful of people, you know, that every one of us have on our phone, and we talk to each other. And I think the camaraderie among brokers in general has gotten a lot tighter over the last 6 years. The guys that survived what happened in 08, 09, I think in a lot of ways got more respect for each other. And so we talk about things on a different level. I did want to bring up one of the things that I think is bad for our industry is we're feeling that overreach of regulation. There are new and interesting things. I find myself explaining about EIAPP certificates and, you know, to brokers that are very established, they don't know what it is, you know, and
Tell us what it is.
I had
Briefly. Just give us the acronym.
Well, the EIAPP certificate basically is something that just states the tier that any diesel engine that's 175 horsepower or higher in a marine craft and was built 2000 model year or after is supposed to have, along with it, on board, an EIAPP certificate that just basically states its level of nitrous oxide is
Emissions control.
what emission control level it's at. It doesn't say it passes anything. It just states it's there.
It's being monitored, yeah.
And there's a MARPOL Annex 6 that basically, if you go online and read that and you still want to renew your broker's license after the fact, but it goes into how all the way down to there. If you don't have this certificate on board, and they've charged, the Coast Guard has the ability to ask for it, and it's mainly, it was set up for yachts that are going out of U.S. waters into international and back. But if you read it, it could be subject to any yacht. Well, nobody's demanding that the sellers, you know, produce EIAPPs when they list the boat.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just it comes up in the middle of a closing, and I find myself, just like Bob Allen was saying earlier today, in the last couple of years, one of the first things I do is I try to get a maritime attorney involved, because you have to weed through so many things. But, you know, there's $25,000 per day per engine fine that your owner is subject to
If he doesn't have this piece of
if he
paper,
doesn't have that piece of paper on board the boat.
on any engine 2,000 newer, 175 horsepower up.
That's, if you read the Marpol Annex 6, that's
Okay.
what,
Paul, you want to say something?
Following on from what Andy said, a situation that I had was a large yacht being imported brand new into the US, and the owner was very specific and contracted it in the new build that the boat must be registered in the US. He wanted to pay tax, he wanted to pay duty, he wanted that yacht to come in that way. His in-house counsel found out about the EIAPP certification and found that his engines that were going in his boat were not Tier 3, they were Tier 2. If that boat did not land in the US on US soil by January 1st, 2015, it would not be allowed to be US registered. This became a bit of a problem. We had to actually independently hire a ship, and that boat was offloaded in Jacksonville on the 30th of December. If we had not unloaded that boat, he would have demanded his money back. It would have been a $14 million mistake by the manufacturer and the dealer, all because an EIAPP certificate needed to be shown, and it was the only way that he was going to register that boat. I learned very quickly about that certification, and also the fact that it's now something that is going to be coming in more and more, both the new, but also that also if a boat is already here and it is already maybe offshore registered, and you wanted to sell that boat again, you may not actually be allowed to, under the EIAPP ruling, to actually register it in the US. So again, it's again bringing in attorneys, and it was because of his in-house attorney it became a bit of a struggle. No one wanted to put their hand up, the engine manufacturer or the manufacturer themselves. So it was actually dealt with myself and the customer sorting out the problem with the shipping company. So just to let you know, there are lots of avenues where solicitors, the legal team.
So regulation is something that is definitely, we're feeling the effects of in the marketplace.
And education for that
Jeff,
regulation.
we are a U.S. builder, and we launched a half a dozen boats that we can't even U.S. flag.
Because
The tier
The
2
tier.
engines.
of the tier thing.
And the sad thing, MTU is who is our primary supplier, actually builds those motors to what would be like a Tier 4. But because the government doesn't recognize that level of low emissions, even though it's cleaner than what the acceptability level is, we've had guys lobbying that really hard. Darrell Wakefield, the president of our yard, has been knee-deep in it for years. But it didn't matter that the engine emission was cleaner than it needed to be to make tier. It wasn't per tier, so we couldn't even U.S. flag our own boats.
Right. Paul, you have something to add?
Well, I've had several interesting experiences in selling boats to Japan, and the ruling when you want to bring a boat into Japan is that any engine built after 2004 is required to have a NOx certificate or EIAPP certificate. So 2 different boats that I sold in the course of a 6-month period that went over there, one went over with MANs and one went over with Caterpillars. And when I called the MAN representatives and asked them if they could supply me with the EIAPP certificates for these serial number engines, they emailed me the technical specs for the engines at no charge and said, have a nice day, go with God. 6 months later, I went to do it with a pair of C12 Caterpillars. And when I called the Caterpillar dealer and asked them for the EIAPP certificates, the bill was to be $14,000 per engine for the certificates.
Oh, by the way,
Yeah,
it's very costly.
Oh, absolutely. And so I called a different dealer in North Carolina that will remain unnamed, but the price was a whole lot better. So it's one of those things that as you learn to navigate these things, you'll learn the tricks to where you can get them, what the costs are going to be. And again, like Andy said, like Bob Allen said, getting an attorney involved proactively helps you to navigate these things, prepare for the eventualities of them. And through your network of brokers and through the people that you know, this is where you'll find this information out.
Sounds like a good topic for yacht sales in the fall.
We've got time to plan on that.
Okay, briefly, we're gonna wrap things up here, and we'll take a couple questions from the audience. I could put the glasses on so I can't read it.
Old man.
Yeah, that's it. Take a look at my life. Okay, So how do you, I'm going to give everybody like 20 seconds to answer this. How do you see the future of yachting and our, as a brokerage? You know, how do you see the next 3 to 5 years? Whether it be, comment on your own market that you're familiar with, wherever that may be. Paul?
If I could predict the future, I'd order my Gulfstream 5 right now.
Yeah.
But I think something that Ash said earlier really resonated with me. And he said that the generation that he deals with now has a pride of ownership. And what I didn't hear him say is that in the millennials, the X generation, whomever you want to call it, that's following along, it's difficult to instill that pride. And I think it's incumbent upon us to create that excitement and to help instill that pride, because that's what's going to help us to firm up our foundation for our future. It's up to us to continue to build excitement and to continue to build professionalism in our industry and continue to gain the trust of the limited base that we have to work with.
Great. Andrew? What do you see? Andy Miles. We got 2 Pauls and we have 2
Your turn.
Just
Two
figured that
Andrews,
out.
yeah, sorry.
Great popular name in this.
Andy Miles, where do you see the next 3 to 5 years? What's your crystal
I
ball?
do see some challenges. I think we're going to have an interesting election year. We've got things going on with world economies and, you know, Britain's position in the
Referendum.
EU and things like this that we're going to have to work through. But people are always going to recreate, you know, and Ash's point about the younger generation, I see that a lot too, and with the tech crowd, you know, because we have a good exposure in the West Coast, and those kids do, if they're going to get into boating, they're chartering right now, and you know, I've got experience with racing cars, and it's funny because you see the 30-year-old kids, they want to drive on daddy's team, but they don't want to own a team.
Yeah.
And but I think that's just because we're in this void of, I mean, I think as these younger guys and girls grow up, they'll too gain the pride of ownership, and I think it's going to continue on strong.
So on balance, will you say the next 3 to 5 years positive or uncertain, or do you see more challenges?
You know, I'm not ready to order my Gulfstream jet either. But,
Okay.
you know, I'd say overall it's going to be positive. I think it's going to be positive.
Andrew Silla.
Well, I studied economics in college, but I'm not about to predict what we're going to face going forward. But taking the social aspect or element forward, I think that what I'm boldly going to predict is that there will be less demand for large yachts. I think the mega yacht market won't grow to the extent it has. I think that the demand for more sophisticated, larger owner-operator boats will increase with the new technologies, static positioning and docking, and I think that it will be common. It won't be uncommon for people with limited experience to operate 50 to 70 to 80-foot boats without crew. I think that boats that require crew or crew dependent under or about 100 feet will diminish in demand because of the change in, I think, attitudes about living or coexisting with non-family members. I think on the manufacturing side, there'll be a consolidation, which I think is a good thing in the long term. And I think boat building will mimic the automotive industry. We used to have hundreds of boat builders, while in the automotive industry there are a dozen or less. I think that builders the builders like Viking and Sea Ray, the other successful builders, will gobble up the market share that were in part retained by the second and third tier builders, and through economies of scale and robotics and other things, I think the labor element, which is huge, 50% of the cost of building a boat, will go down dramatically. And because there aren't many new boats in the pipeline, that's going to further accelerate the demand for new products. So I think there'll be a lot of new product coming from fewer suppliers, and a lot of the product will be mid-range with a lot of technologies that'll make it easy for our customers to operate the boat without crew.
Great.
That's what I see
like
going
that
forward.
answer. Really well put. Very thoughtful. Mr. Paul Burgess, you got 20 seconds.
Thank you.
Broker doesn't do anything in 20 seconds.
Come buy a boat from me. That would be great. 3 and 5 years. There you go.
What are your thoughts on balance, positive, negative, neutral, next 3 to 5 years?
Very positive. I just believe that there is going to be more departmentalizing and more segmentation. I think the charter market is going to improve. I think in the very large motor yachts, that's actually going to stay stable, if not improve. I think in the larger yachts, the super yachts, yes, that's probably going to go down a little bit. And I think in the sector where we're talking about the recreational sector, I think that's going to improve. I think that social media has helped us get to the clients, but I think the clients or the customers have become very savvy, very educated to social media. So in order for us for the next 3 to 5 years do better, I think the camaraderie as a business, as a sector ourselves, we have to work much better with each other, and that way we are going to win over the customer base and we're going to be able to sell more units that way.
I think it's a good idea. It reminds me what you just said. I went to a conference in New York City in the fall, and one of the speakers was Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Bank, and what he said was, ultimately, he was talking about the financial services industry, but it certainly applies to us, is that we have to give our clients a better deal. We got to do a better job taking care of them and do better business. So I think that bodes well for us, for sure. We're going to make time for 2 quick questions. Anyone in the audience? No? Everyone's sated? Cool. Panelists, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great.